So I figured I'd go through this new changes with Arc 3.0 because it is new and exciting information that we actually didn't get the day before, which is nice. So I'm just going to skip through a lot of the generic rationale for things and sort of focus on ultimately what is getting changed and kind of my opinions on it and how it could play out, because I do think this is going to be something that is going to be adding a bit more level to exactly what the play in PvP and PvE will go with, because there are a lot of things that they consolidated, which is interesting, kind of like how everything else has been. So with here we got Amplified, which is basically you move faster, you have weapon handling more agile, and it helps out perform long slides. The long slide thing is interesting because there are things that we'll address that seem to benefit from that, which is cool. The other thing too is we got ionic traces kind of being in everything, and I'm actually pretty surprised they did that, because ion traces generally kind of did that. You know, you got the faster handling, and I think it increased your reload too. But to have everyone have it add energy to all abilities is kind of neat, because it's that's like elemental wells, which is interesting. Also, I missed here blinded jolt. Blinding is going to be interesting, because if you can have everything just blind, the blind effect in PvE is, I'd almost argue it's broken, which is funny because ultimately you can just bully ads. And if anyone that played any of the day one raids where you really got to see it opened up, like, I'd say Deepstone was probably the one that everyone really saw it the most, because the spawns were so easy to just spam everything where they came out. It was very tight corners in like the first encounter and the third encounter. Even Atrax too, but Atrax you kind of had to be a little chilled out with because you didn't want to have everything debuffed. But the fact that people had like Truth Teller grenade launcher and all of that sort of just made it very trivialized. So to have blinding effects a lot easier to pull off could be interesting, and it could make sense to play it for like grandmasters too, because sometimes, like, you know, if you hard focus a grenade launcher, you're kind of leaning in a little too hard. So we'll see how it goes. I really do not like, I'll be the first to tell you, I really don't like when Bungie has stuff that blinds and whites out the screen, because that stuff is way too annoying. I know it's more of like a cut corner trick to make the game look, you know, more intense and stuff, and a lot of companies have been doing it. There's a great video game donkey video that he talks about graphics and how sources of light are just make things too cluttered, and it looks good and pretty and intense on all frame rates, which I understand is why they do it, but sometimes it's just so annoying, and I'm probably going to screech about it. But anyway, the jolt thing is kind of interesting too, because it is the spiritual successor of Arc Web, it looks. And that's kind of a bummer that Arc Web didn't continue the way that it did, but we'll talk about that as we get to it. This just talks about Hunter, and Hunters are getting a new super, and it seems to be kind of like how the Ionic, or the whatever the spear was from Season of Risen, where you sort of just throw the thing, which it could be cool. I think they had to do something with just, you know, they can't have everything just be Arc Strider. Arc Strider I think it's a little underrated to begin with, because the tracking on Arc Strider super is crazy, and not a lot of people think about it, because it does kind of weirdly have combos to it. Like, that's aside from the heavy attack, light attack, where that you kind of do the force palm thing. That thing's awesome, but the stickiness of somebody going in the air and you throwing at the arc staff, the fact that it glues you to people mid-air is very insane. And I'm not saying like it's overpowered. It's just a very unique situation where a lot of sort of connecting roaming supers don't really have that similarity in terms of it. Spectral Blades used to have it, but Spectral Blades hit detection is not as good as it used to be. So but this one, it seems to be like you're just throwing the spear down, and it kind of creates an area effect, which that's fine. I think Hunters could afford to have something that just to change up variety, even though they're pretty mostly even with things you can do. I like how they're keeping combination blow. That's good. That's very strong element, and you get the best of both worlds with being able to essentially get your dodge refunded, and you kind of just keep the loop going. And the small amount of health is always good because that was sort of the appeal with running. Even when it was even when they fixed it and it wasn't as broken, Liar's Handshake played nice into it because you kind of had the nice cushion of heals. Disorienting blows, that's fine. It's whatever. They probably just needed to give them something. As far as the aspects for our Arc Hunter goes, flow state, defeating Jolted causes you to become amplified. When amplified, the hunter's dodge will recharge faster, makes you resistant to damage, and you have quicker reload times. So that's kind of like a consolidation of Bottom Tree's thing where if you dodge, you had the little like extra damage you could take, and Lightning Weave, which was Middle Tree. Was that? Yes, or Lightning Reflexes. What was that? Oh, no, Lightning Weave, yes. Melee increases greatly reload speed, yes. So it was kind of like they're having the best of both worlds. Because I think Middle Tree wasn't bad. It just had a lot of stuff that was kind of situational. And then if you didn't really... I mean, Tempest Strike was weird, but we'll get to that next. Tempest Strike is a aspect, which I think is fine. I can kind of see people being annoyed that it's not a melee option, but I imagine they maybe be making it better because they had that whole thing with your slide was better on if you're amplified, so that could be cool. And it is also, you can kind of bait corners with it, and if we're going to be playing like a bit more passive or things, it could be cool to be throwing that down. I always remembered in Trials, it was when supers were a little more frequent. It was nice to have mid tree because you could swap to Raiju's Harness and cancel your super and then get it back to pull up another one. I still think that's a viable option. And I don't, again, we'll have to see more stuff that happens, so it's nothing definitive. But I do think that still is not a terrible strategy because of just how being able to cancel your super and have a bunch of your bar saved after killing people is very good. Lethal Current, that's top trees, continuation, dodge, melee, lunge. That's in the melee attack, jolts the targets. So it's basically you're getting a better melee attack, which is good. I still think, meleeing in Destiny is always kind of weird because of netcode and a lot of other weirdness, but it is nice to have something boosted, so it could be interesting. The bigger takeaway, though, is that hunters are getting Blink back, which is great. Blink is very solid. It's, the erratic movement throws people off. I'm sure there's going to be great builds where people will be having full advantage of it with Stompies. I still think Stompies are S tier. It doesn't even matter about the aerial things. You can completely write that off. Blink should be good. Let's see. All right, Warlock. They are pretty much keeping Chaos Reach and Storm Trance is fine. The super. What's good is that the Stormcaller roaming super, you either had the blink or landfall, and it was kind of awful to be on Bottom Tree because you were just so slow. But having both of these in tandem are very good. I think landfall's very underrated, and it only got better because I remember a lot of people were saying, "Oh well, they made it worse because it's like I think they might have trimmed the damage a bit, and it used to just only be in a small stack that was below you, but now it just snakes electricity through the it'll follow up against the side of the walls, which is kind of interesting. And you can really catch people off guard. So if you get a landfall off and then are able to blink in front of them when they're on the run, that could be kind of sick because the reach of Stormcaller or the Storm Trance super is it's deceptive. You don't really unless you've played it a lot, you'll surprise yourself how much you can touch people by. Let's see, again, the melees. Ball Lightning was, of course, Chaos Reaches kit, and Chain Lightning was, I just think, the Zap Finger things from, what was that? Chain Lightning. Top Tree, okay. Yeah, those were pretty good. That's fine. What else? Blah, blah, when you're amplified, the arc ball will fly out. Yeah, this is the whole thing. It seems this now seems to be playing into if you are kind of building with the amplified element that's like basically the equivalent of the radiant. You seem to be getting better stuff, which I think is fine. I mean, I think if Arcweb, I'm bummed that Arcweb doesn't continue on because I think it's one of those more identity, if you want to call it, sort of things. But this is fine to kind of continue it. I personally, if you want to hear my crackpot theory, I do think that they got rid of Arcweb because of probable weirdness with testing when it comes to skip grenades. Because think about if you could have one of those pellets scattered in, you throw it, they scatter, and they stay live for a bit, even without Shinobu's, that boost and everything. And so I think there probably was some programming weirdness where you could just decimate people by making this net of the pellets having the arc web interactions, and it just probably was a bit too overpowered. But I don't know, that's just a theory. I could be completely wrong, and it could be something way more simple than that, but that's just something where I thought for the continuation. Anyway, we got Arc Soul is going to be an aspect. That's fine. This is interesting. The rift changes faster when allies are near. That used to be the old thing because I think it was called Electrostatic Shock or something. Let me see. Rising Arc Soul Landfall. What? Oh, Rising Storm. Rifts charge faster when you're... All right, that's definitely the old thing. Because right now it just gives you, like, I don't know, faster reload, or makes you like physically faster. They changed it because they knew that more people were doing the stag rift thing, and they're like, okay, we'll just change it. But the fact that they're changing it back is good. I think that was fine. It encourages you to sort of bunker down, and then you act as like a more support role with the Arc Soul. So I think that's fine. And then it says, well, amplified, any Arc Soul you have or gain is supercharged, increasing its fire rate. That's cool because, I mean, Arc Souls are still very good. Also, if you're running Getaway Artist, that allows you to have the loop of anytime that you don't have a rift, you can eat your grenade and pull up an Arc Soul, and you're back in business. Also, if you ran it with utility kickstart on your class item, that allows you to throw rifts down faster, and you can kind of keep that on, because normally as a Warlock you'd have high recovery. So I think that's good. Lightning Surge activates melee while sliding and performs ball lightning and teleport forward, calling down a lightning bolt. This is interesting. Because this plays into that whole thing with amplified where your slides are better, and if this eats your melee or is your melee, or however this is going to work, this kind of seems like almost like if you did like a back wrist roll. I might be, unless I'm like reading this completely wrong, and then you have a line of lightning come down, and that's your attack. I mean, that's kind of cool. And Warlocks surprisingly do have some very good setups with things in melee range. I mean, Ophidian Aspect's lunge, even if you're coming out of something or like on the move, is crazy. Like I think it must have something to do with netcode or something where like if they got rid of it, it would just kill it. But that is interesting. I also like Karnsteins. I think they are severely underrated, and if you're able to get into that kind of range, do damage, and get a clean up melee and have health, that's very good. That's health insurance. So that could be cool. And we got Electrostatic Mine. Arc abilities, kills, and arcs debuffed enemies create on traces when you become amplified. That's kind of cool because amplified, as we saw up, it kind of makes the whole, it's like Radiant, it kind of makes your whole kit better. But with this, it seems to be making you faster, you're reloading better, and pulling, and it seems to have better handling, which could be good just to eat through a lot of the obligation of, I have to run quick charge, I need a weapon that has quick draw, and things like that. So I think that's cool. Yeah, so I can kind of understand people getting a bit feeling that Warlock is a little lackluster and not that different, but I also kind of understand that Arc Warlock I think had a lot going for it to begin with, and I think if we still got to see how this plays out. But I feel like if they had something just like a bit extra, like Arcweb is in that very weird group of things where it's, yeah, they could make it not as strong, but then as you can see when it comes to piecing things out with these added ability stuff and amplified and stuff, I think they kind of just wanted to cut down on that. So I understand it, and I don't want to say it's bad because it's just, I don't know, it's different. The one thing I will miss though is that Arc Web combined with Crown of Tempests and on Top Tree, you could, and if you ran in Ashes to Assets on the helmet for the grenade kills equals super, you could fly. You can still do it. I mean, I would say if you've never done it before, you owe it to yourself to do it like right now in any activity, because it's crazy how much a Crown of Tempest boosts your super, and you could just fly to a super and constantly just be throwing grenades and stuff. So it's gonna I think Crown of Tempest will still be competitive with how it interacts with everything. So I would definitely keep an eye out for one if you have it, or keep that on the mind. All right, Titan, here we go. So I always thought that Titan, the problem with Titan was that it was going to be the bottom striker is very strong. If we do want to take a quick look at it here, we got frontal assault, powerful melee weapon damage, melee kills, health regeneration, knockout, increased melee range and damage. So that's very strong when you think about a Titan getting in the action with stuff. So what we got here is you still got Thunder Crash, obviously. Ballistic Slam is still in the mix, and the Shoulder Charge is still in the mix. And now they got this new Thruster class ability. By double tapping a button, the Titan bursts into the throttle direction at speed, performing a quick first-person evade, comparable in distance to a Hunter dodge. Arc in this damage type is about mobility. So they basically gave Titans a dodge, which is kind of crazy. And the problem I have with this is I think they really undersell how Titans can be a mobility class. I almost think if you want to get into a whole identity of like, oh, how a class should be, I think Titans they're very strong if you build them out for speed and movement. It's a bit nuts, especially if you factor in Dune Marcher's boost and stuff. But this is another one of those we got to see things. It could be a bit scarier sounding on paper. I don't know. Melee attacks, we got Seismic Shoulder Charge, which blinds. Okay, that's going to be fun. Performing a Seismic Strike, which amplifies the increased radiance for the blind, or while amplified will increase, so amplified is boosting you again, and the blinding effect will last longer. That was going to be driving me insane. Ballistic Slam also returns. So the thing I always kind of had, going back to the strengths of Bottom Tree, I think people tend to forget how when you can get the health back and do... Bottom Striker was kept in check because there wasn't really it was just the punch. It wasn't the Ballistic Slam. It wasn't the Shoulder Charge. But when you factor in things like Ballistic Slam and the Shoulder Charge, and then you factor in something like Synthoceps, Dune Marchers, AC Feedback Fence, it's something where you're getting a lot of good parts for melee range, and I don't want to say it would be oppressive, but you will be able to very much take advantage of what is offered to you. If you take a Ballistic Slam and you fly down and crash onto somebody, and you get the benefit of knockout, and you can get, you killed somebody, so you get the health back, and then you can have the increased melee damage and range. That's like, and on top of Synthoceps, which already boosts your melee by a ton. If you went down to crash on a flag point or something in a game of Control, that you're at least, it's going to be a resilience check if anyone hasn't taken damage. And also, if they did take damage, then you could probably end up killing them. But it's just going to be forcing these crazy scraps, and I really don't want to make it sound like it's going to be so bad. But on the other hand, I just think about how tiny the maps are, and I really do wonder exactly like how this is all going to play out. For all I know, Bungie could completely be releasing all of this with relatively toned out and tweaked down damage numbers and values, but again, we don't know until we physically see it. So Thunderclap. Titan holds down the melee button and charges up energy that they can release in either a quick, powerful jab and held and built up to be unleashed into One Punch Man. The charge state cannot be stored and must be standing on the ground to charge the punch. The damage 90% Thunderclap will one-shot Guardians. Okay, so this is gonna make... Alright, so you know what this reminds me of? This whole thing reminds me of when Shoulder Charges still could one-shot, and somebody could just run around in a wall or run around behind a box in a little circle to build up the momentum to pull off the shoulder charge, and then when they come out they can release it. So I know this sounds really scary, but it's not necessarily it doesn't seem like something we've not really had before. And there are ways to counter it, especially in a world with Wither Horde, especially with even fusions too. Fusions being a lot better, you can take out this stuff a little more safely. But I think this will be strong, but I don't think it's nothing we've really dealt with in the past. So again, we'll have to see. All right, so we're on the Titan aspects now. Touch of Thunder, improved grenades. That's always fun. Flashbangs, fire an extra blinding pulse, of course. Pulse, damage, it creates Onic Trace. Okay, traces go back to ability. Damages over time, lingers. So, okay, they kind of got just like a better grenade. Lightning's the stick. Initial charge. Okay, that kind of, the initial charge plays into what Top Tree Striker had, which is fine. Although it is kind of interesting because it is just for, it's just for lightning. All right, this isn't that bad. Lightning are a little easier to deal with than a lot of, like, they're strong, but I don't think they're necessarily unfair. Storm creates a rolling thundercloud that moves and tracks near the enemies, firing lightning bolts at the ground underneath it. Okay, that could be sick because I just think of Armamentarium. If you're throwing 2 storm grenades at somebody in the pole, first off, the thing with storm grenades that people don't realize why they're really strong is a lot of it is the physical rendering of the graphic. A lot of people don't realize that you don't necessarily get all the lightning bolts or clouds to render, so you can just end up running right through it and looking like you got killed by nothing. So that is kind of that's interesting that this is going to be able to track now. So maybe it will be rendered a little better, but I'd watch out for that. That is going to be making a lot of these smaller maps seem extra painful. All right, Juggernaut. While sprinting with full class energy, the Titan gains a frontal shield that blocks incoming damage. When amplified, the shield is stronger. Amplified, of course, being the charge. Once the shield is depleted by taking damage. So that seems strong, and it could either be, again, it has to be, it's one of those things where I can't really fully comment on it entirely because we don't know the strength of the shield. We don't know how much stronger the shield could be. Also, there is just the general risk of kind of sprinting around can be a bit of a gamble. Like, it's not bad to run around and be mobile, but I don't know. We'll have to see with this one. This could be very good or not as scary. Knockout. This is the one that we going back to this. Knockout was breaking shield. So this seemed to consolidate everything. Melee kills trigger health regeneration and make the Titan amplified. Critically wounding an enemy or breaking the shield increases melee range and damage for a brief period. Titan's base melee becomes arc powered while knockout is active. So this is good. This is what I'm talking about when, you factor this in with ballistic slam, you factor this in with shoulder charge and synthoceps or dune marchers. You're going to be able to, first off, you can definitely get kills with synthoceps flying down, punching on, I mean, right now, if you play on middle Striker Titan, you fly down, you get the ballistic slam. You can sometimes kill people with it. So this, and that health insurance that you get on kills is big. Bottom Striker right now is also very strong. It was at its strongest, I would argue, was Arc Week 2019, which made it, you didn't even need to fire any bullets, and if you had One-Eyed Mask on, it didn't matter. You could just punch people to death. You had health insurance on health insurance. It was broken. It was obnoxious for very good reasons. And I think a lot of stuff that came afterwards sort of corrected a lot of things, and with this, this kind of consolidates, this is Bottom Striker as is. The breaking of the shield and critically wounding is so easy to do. Again, if you go down with a ballistic slam, if you shoulder charge somebody, although I will admit that the arc shoulder charge, it never felt as good because it didn't have the physical shield animation of the void one, and it didn't have the physical hammer strike or the knee, midair knee. So I'm not saying that it's not going to be good, or that it's even bad. Like this is very competitive, and again, with smaller maps, you're going to feel this. I would be like definitely having to play and acknowledge that people are going to be running synthoceps and getting a lot of the most out of this sort of thing. But this is interesting how I'm very surprised that they even continued this on, because again, I think Striker is very, very competitive, but to also give it the melee bit that was from frontal or from reversal rather is interesting. I didn't think they were going to do that. I will say though, just judging off because that seems to be it for the changes with aspects and things, they didn't bring back inertia override, which was sliding through ammo, and what was the other one? Frontal assault, which gave you weapon damage. That was very strong, and that is another thing where I don't think people realize how strong it is. If you do follow people who are more oriented in PvP, where they talk about inertia override, it's what makes it, like, Thorn is a very popular option for Titan to do that because you can get the stronger shots off. It's just so competitive, and I'm kind of glad that if they were going to give something that boosts any sort of damage, that they were going to do it more so for the situation of melee and not any damage for weapons, because when you start dealing with weapons and stuff and you can just fly in, get things, and just do laps, especially with how so much of this arc stuff seems to be focused around speed, I think they did the right move to remove that, because it would just probably be so boring, and there would be almost no reason to not play Titan when you're playing for something like Trials or Comp or whatever. So we'll see what happens. And with Fragment, Spark of Beacons, when the player is amplified, which again is that boost, special weapon kills create a blinding explosion. Alright, so for PvE, that basically makes the Vow of the Disciple breach loader waveframe into getting blinding grenades, that's kind of sick. That should be, again, if you're doing any sort of PvE content going forward, that is worth considering if you're going to be playing on Arc class. Arc of Resistance, when surrounded by enemies, the player has increased damage resistance. People tend to forget that surrounded doesn't mean that your character is surrounded on all four sides, or, in a 360 radius. If you have like 3 enemies in front of you, the game does list that as surrounded, and I don't think a lot of people realize that when it comes to the perks. So that's fine. Although, if you want my 10-second opinion on damage resistance, Resilience is way too strong in the game right now. If there is some sort of tweak, I hope it comes soon, because a lot of the PvE content, and this has nothing to do with, this goes beyond Classy Restoration, I think we're just too strong, and how value, I understand that Resilience needed to have more to it, but it is a little embarrassing how, like, you can bully certain, like, I don't think the bunk build is fine, sort of, but I also think it's a little goofy how you can just, something that's supposed to be this, more monumental thing can just be trivialized by getting right up in its face, eating so much damage, sitting in a rift, sitting in a well, and just doing it. So we'll see what happens. I know damage resistance has been a bit of an issue. Sliding over ammo, okay, so the slide over ammo is the continuation of inertia, but this goes to melee energy and reloading your weapon. That's fine. Also increases the amount of energy. Yeah, that's, this is probably going to be more of like if it comes with like a plus 10 intellect or something, go for it. But again, we'll have to see what competence. And then the jolt. The jolt is the continuation shockwave. So that's about it. Overall, I think this is Arc 3.0 is going to be very strong. PvP, you're probably going to feel it a lot more. Arc's always been weird for PvE bar Titan Thunder Crash, but I would love to see some sort of resurgence with Hunter in PvE, because one of my first things that I ever did, like when I really started caring more about building, was was when Liar's Handshake was insane and you could just bully Shattered Throne Ogre with it. Warlock, Chaos Reach is strong, but it's such a shell of its former self now with how geomags are pretty much mandatory, and I understand that a lot of it is the programming of what the physical shape of the effect of Chaos Reach is. So I don't know if this is gonna, I think they kept some good aspects of Warlock Stormcaller, but it's probably not going to feel as, like, life-changing to go about it in PvE content. I think Void is still going to feel, Void and Solar are going to feel like still really good. So that's about all for me. I appreciate people that did follow through with other videos. Because I don't really do these a bunch, but I do like talking about this stuff, and it's way easier than just, you know, wasting my life on Reddit or talking about it on Twitter. So I appreciate it. Thank you.